year. And for the rest of the time, everyone is going to know it was December because I'm sitting in front of my tree. My little tree.
I love it. It's all about the Christmas spirit, decoration and excitement, and particularly so today because this is
our last popper. Woo woo of the year.
We have reached this.
The 40th one.
40 weeks of our life this year. 2021. I don't think we'll ever forget it.
That's for sure. For so many reasons.
Oh my gosh. So many reasons. But particularly, concerts happening. You organised a festival for the first time ever, I wrote some books, brought out some CDs, and doing all that while learning one popper a week, I have to say, it's made me a stronger, better, fitter person and cellist.
Yeah, better person, a better cellist, helps you prioritize what's important, and I think just goes to show that, a lot of being busy and being able to handle things is to do with your mindset, because I think most people would think what we did this year was impossible, but we somehow did it.
I'm pretty sure I thought it was impossible before we started doing it too. It is quite the experience, but actually, on the other side of it now, I'm so happy about, I'm so proud of us that we, first of all, didn't just stop when it started to get busy again. But
me too.
Having done it, and I know people said that with the Popper Challenge, I do feel stronger and fitter, and I feel like I've so many more, not that I didn't have the skills, but I definitely have honed some of the skills I already had.
And I found some skills that I would have rarely used before that now I'm totally confident using, like fourth finger and thumb position.
And also, I think it's really fascinating because we had each other on it. 2 different points of view is incredibly helpful. I wish as a student I had this type of resource actually. Then I'll throw in all our guests with all of their fabulous ideas. It's just been pretty epic. So
it has been. And I was thinking about how before we started this, we had said to each other like, oh, if you can't do one of the weeks, it's fine because we can just take it on our own and just do a thing. We didn't do that at all. We came to the table together for all of them, and I think that's just extraordinary. Yeah.
Well, I think it's extraordinary because both of us have been sick during these at different periods in the year.
Yes.
Other people, I remember having an injury one week where I kind of said, well, this is just as far as I'm going to be able to go this week. All kinds of things that we've had to deal with and manage. It's really just shows you how life keeps going no matter what you're doing, right? So here we are. Popper
and
23.
the number of different, I think a lot of people know the background of this one wall in my house, but the other various venues I've said hello to you all from.
You are actually really fascinating because, my God, have you been travelling around while you're doing this? I'm so impressed. I'm actually impressed that I have one setup that works. So. The last popper.
Popper 23. Oh
we should say to everyone, we didn't do these in the order in the book. That's why this is our last popper. And we left ourselves an interesting one for the end, right?
Yeah, we wanted to end on somewhat of a high note. I know when we set out at the beginning of the project, we thought, will we end with one that's like really epic? But I actually think in some ways, this is a great synopsis of a lot of the studies, There's some varying skills, and it's quite an enjoyable one to play, but it's a bit challenging and, really has some stuff you can dig into in it. And of course, it has a long repeated section because it has to qualify, as a popper study.
For me, I have to say I was very happy to see that I only had to practice half of this. Loved it. It's very good. I suppose when we're talking at the very, very beginning, obviously you've got bow distribution with a whole pile of string crossings. So for me, bow circle city, I love the idea of being able to think about when you do actually circle. So clockwise, anti-clockwise, clockwise, clockwise, and working out exactly how many notes are on one string. Really getting to the bones of this. If we're bringing it back to nothing, how many notes, how fast that actually needs to happen. So whatever tempo you're doing, you could actually, with the metronome, just practice bow and open strings for this whole study.
Totally. That would be so useful.
Yeah.
I had a student earlier today, and I wanted to bring up bow circles with her, but I just kind of thought it would melt her mind at like where she was in this particular moment. So I was thinking about how would I explain that without going so in depth. And I thought one thing that can kind of, tell me if you think this makes sense. It's sort of the way you lean into the string before the string crossing. That
Absolutely.
is what the bow circle does. So I thought about this as well in terms of feeling the tension and release in the string before all the string crossings.
Yeah,
which
absolutely. I think a lot of people practice like that actually when they do even give an accent. I remember some teacher before teaching me about that, where you do give a little accent, just so you give yourself a little warning of where that happens. So that's a useful practice technique as well. And then you of course remove those accents because you don't want to put them in the final play, but it's really good for giving yourself the markers, right?
Yeah. And there's something too about playing really legato where you're going to want the moment. You're actually almost going to want to lean into the string crossing, aren't you? If you come away, you're going to lose the sense of legato. So
yeah. And back to what we've talked about a lot over these studies, the idea that how close can your angle actually be? So imagine that you're actually just on the double stop area, and then when you are there, just coming up even just a millimeter from either string, but don't go any further. None of this kind of idea of it's not legato enough when you're doing that. So being able to get closer to the string and staying, just don't over angle. I think that's something to really play around with. It can be quite kind of snake like. Another thing I found really interesting when I was doing it is what really affects the legato in this piece is the left hand. That you shift and have too much weight in a particular shift. So let's say, for example, bar 3. Weight. If you actually lean into that too much when you arrive, that's going to give it a weird accent. So the bow should continuously be just playing at the same speed and same weight. So actually you have to keep the left hand almost lighter than you would for something quite forte, right? That kind of idea where it's just a little bit, see how little weight you can get a good sound with, which is a great way to play the cello anyway, because it removes all the tension.
Yeah, I noticed as well that bar, and bars like that, so I'm glad you said the point about less weight on the shift, because I think that there's a few bars like this where you're doing a lot of consecutive shifts in opposite directions. And they're somewhat easy shifts, right? Like, these aren't hard notes to find. But there's something about the physicality of going back and forth, that you have to be super mindful of the lightness, because this is, you know, one of those things you might be able to power through, you know, muscle through for a bar or two, but you would feel really tired. I certainly noticed that sort of lactic acid building up in my arms if I wasn't being aware of that, so.
Yeah,
I mean, even stuff like, it's not really exactly the same, but even like bars 14 through 16, I think it's the same sort of thing. Oh, sure. You have to be careful.
Yeah, and actually, interesting that you said bar 14 through 16 there, because suddenly we have to actually shift at double speed to what we were doing beforehand.
Yeah.
That really kind of messes with your head, doesn't it? And I found that if you're practicing it, you could often do this. You know, something where you kind of slow up towards the end, but it doesn't really work musically, so you have to really. You almost have to find yourself pushing through those second beats in the bar, second and fourth beats, because obviously with the accent and all those things involved. Yeah. You can
the accent is super tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's again like, because I'm always like wanting to give a big whammy here, and I kind of don't. I think really. Are you thinking more left hand or bow for that accent?
I did try it with the left hand. So, and also, quite often for myself, when I think of an accent, I don't necessarily think it has to be too much. If I just let my brain think about that note more than the rest. Often you'll naturally think about it more like a singer than you would like I suddenly have to go something with the bow and the left hand. So for me, if I can just manage at that moment, even I don't know if that comes out as an accent there, but
yeah, it totally does.
It just feels, if I can direct my mind towards it, and often that actually solves a lot of things in cello playing, doesn't it? Just remove the thought process.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, especially as we've spent this whole year talking about cello technique, but also all the ways we implement it in playing. And again, like, what is the purpose of like being able to do all this stuff if it's not led by like your musical conviction, you know? And absolutely. I think the great thing 100%. About spending a year thinking like this is that, you know, it just gives you more faith in like you go for it, and then if something doesn't work, you can analyze it and step back and use the skills that you have, because you know you have all these options of how you create that accent. But being led by the sound, I think, is the ultimate goal.
That I totally agree with you. Now, in saying that, I did actually think about whether I'm doing a link note or an old finger or a new finger shift. So first finger. Even though I am leading with my brain, I've already worked out how I'm going to do.
It's one of these paradoxical things, isn't it? Because you're trying to say, like, be led by the music, but we're doing it with this intelligence, right? You know, you're not making decisions about something musical that you want to do because of how it works technically, but rather using the understanding that you have to be able to launch yourself.
Exactly, and this is what Popper does give you. Is it gives you the, you know, I was playing this Ligeti string quartet last week, and I have to say it's much harder than the solo sonata, I think, hands down. It just has all of these things where you suddenly have to be playing up here in a second, you know, mad kind of, you know, like the whole thing is just absolutely insane. And I think had I not done the Popper project, where I just know where all the notes are, actually.
Yeah.
And even still, it's a mental piece. It's actually very rarely performed because it's so mental. But super cool at the same time as well. So that's the whole point of the Popper, really, isn't it? That it kind of frees us up to be able to focus on other things. What did you think about, I found 17, 18, 19 and 20, 4 fascinating bars. So, for me, so here, I of course did my kind of practice. Just make sure I'm balanced. So there were some interesting notes that I found myself I really had to pay attention to. So this shift, and I needed to know that it was actually going from a minor third to a major third, so I had to get smaller in that one.
Right.
So that it was really funny. Those 4 bars were kind of hilarious until I realised that one shift gets smaller, and the next one, when we do it in the sequence, actually gets bigger. Just to confuse us. So when we do this, suddenly then we're at that's our minor third, and that's suddenly a bigger interval. So that was a brain melt moment for me, because I just thought that was a bit mean of Popper, really.
Do you know, I realize I've probably given myself a total break on this, but instinctively, without even doing this on purpose, I changed the fingering. So I'm actually doing... So I'm shifting thumb to thumb.
Are you?
Oh yeah. Because that's the pattern it follows later on. But you've given yourself a whole extra challenge there.
You know,
that will be very good for you.
Will it? Actually, sometimes smarter fingering choices are much better, but as we are trying to give ourselves extra challenges on this challenge experience, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But
I think it's just so funny that my brain did that without even realizing. Like, I just completely subconsciously changed that fingering.
similar area. So I always think it's important for people in an area where you are shifting around a lot and you have a lot of... That G has to be the same G. Same G. Same G. Same G. So if you can give yourself kind of like a, whatever you want it to be, a pedal note, that you can make sure that your tuning is always centered around that, then I think that's helpful. In a lot of these areas, actually. Yeah. It's good fun.
Yeah. Totally. And carrying on from those bars, the ones after, I mean, this is just, this is why I think this actually is a great popper to end with, because there's so many variety of skills, but it just reminded me of all these things that we've talked about through the different studies and kind of just coming back to it. But we have these big shifts at the beginning of each bar. And then, sorry. I mean, one is the interval, right? Being able to pitch that. But I guess the tendency probably would often be, if you're not thinking about it, to use way too much bow for that first shift to facilitate getting up there. And of course we have to save.
I love it. It's great, all those shifts. And also, when you said weight or moving the bow too much, also the left hand weight. So if you can manage to not sink in, you know, because that will also give an added accent. Because your left hand has too much weight when you arrive. So just keeping an eye that it's all like coming from ya-da-da-da-da-da as you would sing. And singers tend to do a thing where if they have a low note going to a high note, they pitch it at the high note and they go ya-da-da-da-da-da. So you have to actually feel the height in your stomach muscles. And then just literally take it from below. I only learned that in my lessons. But
I love that.
It's really fascinating because then you don't think about it so much as a, you know, of course we could play it like that, but yeah.
It's sort of like if we were doing a string crossing and you were keeping your arm at the A string height. Oh my gosh.
So many levels.
I know. Nerdtastic.
I know. I just wanted to say about that, the chromatics actually. I found it fascinating, particularly. It's very easy to kind of become a little bit flat in that area, isn't it? So to make sure that you're really pitching every single note, so don't let your ear relax just because it's a chromatic scale and it's easy. You really have to think centered as we come down that little bit. And then I don't mind having a little moment of time there because it's so
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second time it comes back and we have the shocker to the major. Oh, you know?
That was so
to
funny.
Really enjoy it.
Got it, yeah, absolutely. And actually, when we're there, this was a fascinating area, just key-wise, isn't it? When you're there, always really good. I have a very helpful wolf note on that F sharp.
Awesome.
So you have to find ways to make that work for your cello. So for me, I had to pitch it a tiny bit flatter than I expected there in order to be sounding good with the B that we had. And then I also had to, for my thumb on the F sharp, almost, because obviously you're over on the lower string, I had to feel like I had to almost rotate my hand back when I got up to the A string. And that's why there's all this madness going on. If we think about the bow, I can't sing the actual tuning while doing this. And then back up to the A string, D, A, D, A, D, A, D. I mean, it's a lot. So people need to spend a bit of time bowing open strings there, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know, it's so much, this moment is so much, it's one of those things of like the synthesis between the intonation and the sound. You know, you might be able to just manage not coming over balance wise if you wanted, but it's so important, I think, to get like a very centered pitch here, because you know, it's this understanding of, and Parpa does this everywhere, doesn't he, where you shift tonal areas quite suddenly, and the centering and the like tone of the notes, no matter what the dynamic, have to be so clear so that the listener understands what's happening. They're not just like, what is this random F sharp doing in there? Yes.
I love it. So I also found it really fascinating for those bars there, like 53, 54 and the next two, that I had to really think about finger organization. So the first bar is fine. Here, get my first finger ready already. Now this first finger, often I found it just didn't move over in time. Which, now maybe everyone else doesn't have the same coordination issues that I have with the circus.
I think I would too.
But
I found for me the biggest thing in that bar was the balance on that first finger, that one. That I found the trickiest.
So that one's exactly, and I think everyone's going to find, depending on their hand shape, something else really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So the next line was kind of fine for me. I was thinking of you and your double stops, at how epic your double stops would be, because you practice them every day, like every good cellist should.
Yeah, but I think still it's when you were saying stoppy starting practice, I definitely did a lot of that. It goes back to what you were saying about the chromatics earlier on, It's so easy to get away with sort of not being very accurate about them. But it's that whole thing though, even though you are going to accurately practice those, you have to just kind of trust that your hand knows the spacing when you get to it in performing.
Absolutely. And this always reminds me of that big long scale in Dvorak, that I think when I mean the first time I played that was in college, and I remember not knowing the technique for that. Mm-hmm. I practiced it and stuff, but I wasn't sure would it actually pan out. And I remember doing it a couple of times, and just the heart will get you through and all that, but actually knowing now that all you need to do is actually release, 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 release. So if you can manage to get your left hand to go in a rhythm, ba 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 ba, if you can trust that your left hand will do that, and you just practice that rhythm, then nothing is hard about this anymore. So obviously you need the time to practice it, which we are quite limited on. But
you do, but it's years of practice, and I do think that these are the type of things that years of practice do really help with, because I think that I've been teaching a few students like starting thumb position in octaves right now, and it's understanding that spacing, right? And when you say we're practicing release, 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 we're really also practicing the slight differences in spacing, because every octave is going to be a little bit smaller or bigger depending if you're going up or down. And I think the thing is, it's trust, isn't it? You have to have faith in the process. Like, you practice it this way.
Yeah.
And then when you perform it, you have to trust that your body's going to do that. I think too many times you see people who are trying to do what they've practiced when they perform, and it won't work.
Yeah.
You have to just let go and believe.
Set it free. So, I mean, for me, definitely, if I was starting to practice these, I would definitely do, just to recap what we've already talked about, the actual thumb on the bottom, then the top, with the hands in the right position. So you're getting used to that feeling of just one finger, and then you try it together. So what I would actually try is keep going back and forth over the ones until they're totally right. But feeling that release, like, I can't stress that enough. You know yourself, you don't want to get hand-claw cramp. Yeah.
Ailbhe, the way you've just described that is exactly how I teach octaves. It's exactly the same. That process, and then I mean, it just shows we have some tools in the toolkit that are sort of universal, but that sort of connection, practice, oh my gosh, just invaluable.
But I love it. But also the last thing that I think I missed as a student for me was I needed someone to tell me that. So obviously the bow now just stays at the same weight and speed, right? So you just do. So the left hand is the one that creates the rhythm here, which is obvious. Obviously it wasn't so much to me as a student, but... And where do you listen? So bottom note. You know, that if you do have that nice release in there, and the left hand is literally like a machine gun, and you can start it slowly, or even slower than that, and just work up your speed like you would down bow or up bow staccato.
Yeah.
I think that's the way that eventually you just have to let the bow go and have the left hand. Thank you. You know, like it's gotta be like, got it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh my gosh. If only I could do that after every octave shifty passage I have. Oh yeah.
I like to do this
Nailed it.
afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's end of the year with cello. I'm not sure we've done a spin on cello power. That might be the first one ever.
Today has to be the day. When I finish, I'm definitely spinning it. Because it's only really that last octave passage, which is slightly different because obviously you've got the whatever it is. So actually placing this. It's quite, it's interesting, isn't it, to get a nice sound and a nice balance. So you have to use a bit of a firmer hand. How did you approach that?
Well, I was going to tie in your point about the previous octaves because you mentioned that you are always leading with your thumb. And I think that this is a really important thing. Like, I would use to find the first one. I'm thinking about my thumb replacing where my second finger was, right? So the intonation of this octave, it's all about finding where that thumb is. So I'm really leaning towards that particular spot and just sort of floating the third finger.
I love it.
In terms of weight balance, I mean, I think in general with octaves, almost always you're going to be more weighted in the bow on the lower string.
I love it. Have you anything else that you'd like to add, or are we at playtime?
I think we're going to play because
God.
it's so great.
Have fun.
I can't believe it. Bravo. Huge congratulations to ya.
You too. What an achievement.
Oh my gosh.
So, go us. It's been absolutely epic, and I look forward to next year's project.
Yeah, me too. Oh my
I love
gosh. What a way to end the year, man. That is just amazing.
Seriously. Absolutely love it. Alright,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yay.
We'll see you soon. Happy buffering, everyone.